The Unseen War for Peace. Humans fight back against galactic manipulation. Laena Arel stepped off the transport shuttle onto the vast docking platform of the Arios space station. The station, a sprawling structure that bridged the cultural and political divides of the galaxy, stood as a beacon of unity amidst the vastness of space. It was the epitome of cross-cultural collaboration where beings from every corner of the universe came to negotiate trade and, most importantly, understand each other. For Laena, it was not just a job, but a mission to represent her home planet Lysra and to build meaningful diplomatic relationships with civilizations far beyond her own. She was young, only 28, but her reputation had preceded her. A skilled diplomat with a keen intellect, Laena was chosen to lead the delegation for the Lysran people, a species known for their deep respect for tradition, but also their desire to foster peace in an ever-expanding universe. The weight of this responsibility bore heavily on her shoulders. She had studied the customs, languages, and histories of countless races, everything she thought necessary to navigate the complex political landscape of Arios. However, as she stood there looking up at the vast expanse of the station, she couldn't shake the feeling that no amount of preparation could truly prepare her for what lay ahead. Her task was simple in theory: build relationships, foster cooperation, and ensure that Lysra was recognized as a valuable partner in this galaxy-spanning network of worlds. But in practice, it was far more complicated. The sheer diversity of the beings that called this station home was staggering. How could she possibly represent Lysra when there were so many competing interests and ancient rivalries at play? She had been briefed extensively, of course, but there was a vast difference between academic understanding and the lived reality of interspecies diplomacy. As she made her way through the bustling corridors of Arios, Laena could already see the subtle differences between the species she had studied and the ones she was encountering in person. The towering Shintari with their crystalline exoskeletons, the short but robust Utharans with their communal language, and the Halanx whose floating forms emitted musical notes with every movement. She was prepared for these differences, but seeing them in person, hearing their voices and feeling the weight of their presence was something entirely different. The meeting room where Laena was to meet her first partner, Solis, was located in the heart of the station, a place where only the most important discussions took place. She had been briefed on Kai beforehand. He was a coordinator from Earth, a human, a species that Laena had read much about. Humans were known for their adaptability and their ability to bridge gaps in ways that many species could not. But Laena also knew that humans with their complex emotions and histories were difficult to understand fully. It would be a challenge, but one that she felt she was prepared for. As the door to the meeting room slid open, Laena was greeted by Solis. Tall with dark hair and a strong but not overly imposing build, he had the easy confidence of someone who had spent years navigating complex diplomatic waters. His warm smile, however, quickly gave way to a look of confusion as Laena stepped forward, offering her hand in greeting. "Greetings," Laena said, her voice clear but formal. "I am Laena Arel of Lysra. It is an honor to meet you." However, the words that came out next were far from what she had intended. In her native language, she had meant to say, "It's an honor to meet you. I look forward to working with you," but she mistakenly used a word that, according to her training, could be interpreted as a much more personal invitation. Her heart sank as she saw Kai's eyebrows furrow slightly. She instantly recognized the misunderstanding. The words didn't come out the way she intended. Her heart raced. The translation device built into her communicator kicked in almost immediately, but it only amplified the situation. The translation device, misinterpreting her intention, rendered the phrase as something far more suggestive, an accidental invitation, rather than a formal greeting. For a brief moment, Laena could only stand there, horrified by what had just transpired. Kai looked at her with a mixture of confusion and amusement. There was a long, awkward pause. Kai cleared his throat, his voice calm but tinged with an unmistakable curiosity. I think there's been a slight miscommunication." He smiled, perhaps to ease the tension, but Laena could tell that her error was not something easily brushed aside. "Let me explain." Kai continued, gesturing for her to take a seat. "The language of Lysra is quite different from anything we've encountered before, and some words can carry multiple meanings. I know the device translates, but it's not perfect." Laena nodded, now acutely aware of the gravity of her mistake. She had studied the nuances of countless languages, but this misunderstanding, was beyond anything her training had prepared her for. She had no idea that the word she had used was so easily misinterpreted. And yet in this moment, it was clear that it was not just the language barrier that she needed to overcome. It was the cultural gap, the unspoken rules that existed between individuals of different species, different worlds, and how they communicated on a far more personal level than just words. Kai, ever the professional, didn't let the mistake linger. Instead, he patiently began to explain how the misinterpretation had occurred, offering Laena a small but genuine smile. Despite the awkwardness of the moment, he gave her the space to correct herself. This was the beginning of a new lesson for Laena, not just in language, but in how to truly connect with someone from another world. The understanding she would need to build with Kai would not come from textbooks or training. It would come from time, patience, and a willingness to learn from mistakes like this one that would shape her understanding of the universe. Laena sat in the grand negotiation hall of Arios, surrounded by representatives from various star systems. The room was vast with sleek metallic walls adorned with symbols representing the diverse cultures present. Despite the grand setting, Laena couldn't shake the unease that had settled in her stomach since her arrival. The conversations around her were cordial, but beneath the surface there was something subtly off. She had entered this mission with the expectation that she would be representing Lysra in its finest light, diplomatic, peaceful, and eager to build meaningful relations. Yet as the days went by, Laena began to notice patterns, inconsistencies that made her question the true intentions of her home planet's representatives. The first sign came during a private dinner with several Lysran diplomats. While discussing the expansion of trade routes and resource sharing, Laena overheard a hushed conversation between two high-ranking officials. They mentioned securing more than just trade routes, referencing undisclosed planets and territories. The tone was casual, but the implications were chilling. Laena had been briefed on the importance of open borders and peaceful exploration, but these conversations painted a different picture, one of political maneuvering and territorial conquest. She couldn't ignore the sense of discomfort that crept over her as she heard more and more about these untapped planets that were conveniently located in resource-rich sectors. Laena knew Lysra was ambitious, but this wasn't just ambition. It felt like something more sinister was brewing behind the scenes, something that went beyond diplomacy, something that could threaten the very peace she was meant to uphold. After the dinner, she made her way to her quarters, her mind racing with thoughts. The next day, she attended a formal meeting with delegates from a neighboring star system. The topics on the table were meant to focus on cultural exchange and cooperative mining projects, but Laena couldn't shake the feeling that there were more pressing matters being discussed in the shadows. The way the representatives from Lysra avoided eye contact whenever the subject of planetary resources came up only fueled her suspicions. As the days turned into weeks, Laena continued to participate in various meetings, but her doubts only grew. The official documents they were supposed to sign, deals about mutual trade, the sharing of knowledge and so on, seemed to gloss over critical details. Clauses were vague, and important signatures were rushed without proper review. What bothered her most was the increasing frequency with which certain sections were omitted or altered in the documents just before they were presented for approval. One morning she found herself in a small meeting room with Kai Solis, the Earth liaison, reviewing one of the contracts. The air was tense as they went over the figures and terms, but when Laena caught sight of a detail she had missed earlier, her heart sank. The agreement seemed to imply exclusive mining rights on a planet that had been listed as a neutral zone. It wasn't something that could be ignored. "Does this look off to you?" Laena asked, pointing to the section of the contract. Kai peered closely at the text, his brow furrowed as he scanned the document. "It's vague. Too vague for something as important as planetary mining rights. I think someone's trying to slip something under the radar." Laena nodded, her suspicions confirmed. "I've been noticing things like this all over. Missing clauses, rushed approvals, and off-the-record conversations about resource claims that don't match the public stance. Lysra is not just trying to broker peace. They're making moves behind the scenes." Kai leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from concern to focused determination. "We need to dig deeper, but we have to be careful. If they find out we're looking into this, it could put both our positions at risk." Lena's thoughts spun. How could she trust the government of her own planet when it seemed like they were playing a game of politics at the expense of others? She had always been proud of Lysra, proud of the values of peace and cooperation they espoused, but now that pride felt misplaced. The discovery made her feel like a pawn in a game she didn't fully understand. But she couldn't back down now. She had to figure out the truth. Over the next few days, Laena worked with Kai to trace the lines of communication between Lysran officials and external corporations. They discovered encrypted messages between high-ranking Lysran diplomats and representatives from powerful resource conglomerates. The hidden channels were secure, but they weren't perfect. As Kai cracked the code, they found evidence of deals being made in secret deals that involved off-planet mining operations, environmental exploitation, and most troubling of all, control over resources that had been promised to neutral systems. Laena felt sick to her stomach. The evidence was clear. Lysra wasn't just trying to make alliances, they were actively seeking to dominate and control other worlds. The peaceful rhetoric she had believed in seemed like nothing more than a cover for something much darker. Her hands trembled as she reviewed the final decrypted message. She had suspected it for a while, but now it was undeniable. The strings of political power were not being pulled for peace, they were being pulled for control. "That's it," Laena whispered, her voice hoarse. "They're planning to take over the resources of other planets. They're using these negotiations as a smokescreen." Kai's face was grave. "And if we expose this, we'll be risking not just our careers, but the peace we've been trying to build." Laena clenched her fists. "I never thought Lysra would be involved in something like this. I don't know if I can continue working with them, knowing this." Kai's gaze softened, his voice steady. "You don't have to make a decision alone, Laena. We'll figure this out together." But even as they spoke, Laena knew that the path ahead was fraught with impossible choices. Could she remain loyal to the planet that had raised her, the people she had sworn to protect, when the truth was so far removed from what she had believed? She could already feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Her heart was torn between the duty to her people and the moral obligation to do what was right for the galaxy. The diplomatic halls of Arios buzzed with activity, the hum of alien voices, the clinking of translation devices, and the clatter of various races gathering in their respective groups. Laena Arel had already spent weeks navigating this space, learning the intricacies of interstellar diplomacy, all the while growing more and more acquainted with Solis. Their relationship had begun as that of colleagues, partners, in a shared mission to navigate the delicate negotiations between worlds. But as the days passed and their bond deepened, something more began to blossom between them. At first it was subtle. There were long conversations after meetings about everything from cultural practices to childhood memories and occasionally the intricacies of their diplomatic roles. Laena had always found Kai to be an intriguing man. He was intelligent, capable, and easy to talk to. His insights into human culture combined with his dedication to ensuring peaceful coexistence between species were impressive. What caught Laena off guard, however, was the comfort she felt in his presence. She didn't feel like an outsider with him. She didn't feel the need to mask her thoughts or worries. Kai listened, truly listened, in a way that few others did. They had been working together late one evening, going over documents related to the upcoming negotiation with the Utharans. The room was dimly lit, the faint glow from the holographic screens casting soft shadows across the walls. Kai was hunched over a tablet reviewing a section of a draft treaty when Laena leaned back in her chair, stretching her arms above her head. The exhaustion of a long day's work had finally started to catch up with her. "Long day?" Kai asked, glancing up from his tablet, his voice gentle. "You have no idea." Laena sighed, rubbing her temples. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm cut out for this. It's so much more complex than I ever imagined." Kai set his tablet down, pushing his chair back slightly as if giving her the space she needed to breathe. He smiled warmly, the corners of his eyes crinkling in a way that made him appear more human than diplomat. "You're doing fine. No one expects perfection, but you're doing your best, and that's enough." There was something about his words, his sincerity, that struck Laena deeply. She had always been taught that the path of diplomacy was one of stoic professionalism, devoid of personal connection. Yet here she was, feeling something that transcended that professionalism. The next few days were filled with more shared moments, quick exchanges of jokes, discussions about their hopes for the future, and quiet moments when their eyes met and lingered for a second too long. Laena had always been a firm believer in keeping her emotions separate from her work. She had been trained to suppress personal feelings in favor of the mission, but with Kai, it felt impossible to maintain that distance. The more she worked with him, the more she realized she was falling for him. Kai, too, was beginning to feel the same. Though he had always been a calm, collected individual, Laena had a way of breaking down his walls, of making him feel things he hadn't expected to feel. There were moments when he caught himself watching her from across a crowded room, his thoughts momentarily drifting to her smile, her laughter, the way she carried herself. But he pushed those thoughts away, buried them under the weight of the mission they both shared. Diplomacy, after all, was far more important than personal desires. But as the days went on, it became increasingly difficult for either of them to ignore the growing attraction. They found themselves lingering in the hallways after meetings, talking about everything under the stars except, of course, the matter that had brought them here. It was a delicate dance, each one hesitant to step too far, too fast into the realm of personal connection. Still, there were moments that could not be ignored, the way their hands brushed as they passed a document to each other, the quiet laughter they shared over a shared meal, and the way Lena's heart would race whenever Kai's gaze met hers for just a fraction longer than necessary. It was clear that they were more than just colleagues, but the question that loomed over them both was whether this budding relationship would help or hinder their diplomatic mission. Laena realized that this newfound connection could be both a blessing and a curse. She had always placed the mission above all else, but Kai was making her question that perspective. Could she truly balance both her duty to Lysra and her growing feelings for him? And what would their relationship mean for the broader goal of fostering peace among the planets? Her thoughts were interrupted one evening as they sat across from one another in a small, quiet room, reviewing some papers on the next negotiation. The weight of the situation was beginning to take its toll. There had been whispers of Lysra's underhanded dealings, and Laena knew she couldn't ignore the implications of what they had uncovered. Yet here she was, looking across the table at Kai, her colleague, her partner, and perhaps something more. "I never thought it would be this complicated," Laena confessed, breaking the silence. Her voice was quieter than usual, the words coming out almost hesitantly. "I came here to help build something real, but I'm starting to see that things aren't as simple as I thought." Kai set his papers aside and looked at her with a mixture of empathy and concern. "I know. It's hard when the truth doesn't match what you hope for. But you're doing the right thing, Laena. You've always done what's right, even when it's hard." She met his gaze, and in that moment, the walls she had carefully constructed between her personal and professional life seemed to crumble. "And what if doing what's right means letting go of what I want?" she asked softly. Kai's expression softened, and he leaned forward slightly. "What do you want, Laena?" She hesitated for a moment, searching his eyes, and in that instant, everything felt so clear. "I want to do my job. I want to protect the people I care about. But I also want something else. Something I didn't think I'd ever have the chance to have." Kai's smile was almost imperceptible, but it was there. "What's that?" Her heart fluttered in her chest. "A future, with someone who understands me, with someone I can trust." In the silence that followed, neither of them spoke, but the understanding between them deepened. There was no going back now. The connection they had shared, the bond they had built, was something neither of them could deny. But as Laena realized, this newfound relationship would be tested severely. The revelation of Lysra's covert operations and the political corruption at the heart of their diplomatic efforts had put everything they had worked for at risk, and now their personal connection would be the crucible in which their professional lives would be forged or broken. Kai and Laena both understood the stakes. They were no longer just colleagues working to broker peace. They were individuals caught in a moral crossfire. They had uncovered the darkness within their respective governments, and now they had to decide, would their loyalty lie with the ideals they once believed in, or with each other. Their love, once a simple, unspoken feeling, now had the potential to either fortify their resolve or shatter their dreams. Their relationship would be tested by the very forces they had once fought to understand, and in the end they would have to face the question of whether love could conquer the corrupt systems they had uncovered. But one thing was certain: their bond would no longer be just a quiet connection between two colleagues. It had become something far more powerful, something that could either save them or destroy everything they had worked for. The quiet hum of the Arios space station filled the air, As Laena sat alone in her quarters, a holographic screen casting a faint light over her face. She had spent the last few days combing through data, trying to make sense of the discrepancies she had uncovered. Her fingers traced over the encrypted documents, her mind racing, as the pieces slowly began to fall into place. What she had suspected was now becoming undeniable. There was something deeply corrupt festering at the heart of Lysra's diplomatic efforts, and it all led back to one man, Ambassador Velos. Velos had always been a shadowy figure in the political landscape of Lysra. A man of immense power, he was known for his charm, his diplomatic finesse, and his ability to manipulate situations to his advantage. But there was something else about him, something that Laena had started to pick up on. He moved through the halls of power with an ease that spoke of a deep understanding of the inner workings of the system and a ruthless streak that Laena had only begun to comprehend. She had first met Velos during a high-level conference, where he had been the one to greet her with a warm smile and an air of authority that immediately put her on edge. He had made small talk with her, his words smooth and carefully chosen, but Laena couldn't shake the feeling that every interaction with him was part of some larger game she wasn't fully privy to. Ambassador Velos, she murmured to herself, the weight of his name now heavy on her mind. Why do I feel like I'm always being watched when he's around? It wasn't just the way he looked at her. It was the way he seemed to control the room without even speaking. He had a presence, a quiet power that set him apart from the others. And as Laena began to dig deeper into the political landscape, she started to see the web of influence that Velos had woven. Laena's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. She quickly closed the holographic display and opened the door to find Kai standing there, his expression serious. Something's wrong, Laena, he said, stepping inside. I've been following the trail you uncovered. Velos, he's not just playing the game, he's rigging it, and we've barely scratched the surface. Laena nodded, her face pale. I know. I've been going through the documents. There are links between Velos and several corporate entities I've never heard of before. They're all tied to the same resources. Resources that Lysra is supposed to be sharing equally with other planets. But it's clear Velos is making deals that would allow Lysra to dominate those resources. Kai's eyes narrowed. And he's doing this under the guise of diplomacy, using our name to justify his actions. He's manipulating the entire system. Laena clenched her fists. And it's not just the corporations. There's something more. I've traced some of the financial backers. There's evidence of money laundering, bribery, underground dealings that go beyond mere trade agreements. Velos is working with some of the most dangerous individuals across the galaxy. Kai crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. So he's been using the diplomatic efforts to cover up what could be a massive political and economic takeover. Laena nodded, her mind swirling with the gravity of the situation. He's playing everyone. But what's worse, he's manipulating people who are close to him, including those who've been advocating for peace. This is bigger than just corporate greed. It's a power grab on a galactic scale. Velos was a man who knew how to control his image. He was always impeccably dressed, his every gesture seemingly designed to convey authority and composure. But Laena could see the cracks beneath the surface, the way he avoided certain questions, the subtle threats he made when he thought no one was listening. When they had first met, he had smiled at her like an old friend, as if he truly cared about her well-being. But Laena was beginning to see the truth. Velos didn't care about anyone but himself. His charm was a tool, his kindness a mask. Beneath it all was a mind that saw people not as equals, but as pawns in a much larger game. That realization terrified Laena. If he was capable of manipulating those around him with such precision, what else was he capable of? And more importantly, how far would he go to protect his interests? I don't trust him, Kai, she said one evening as they sat in the quiet of her quarters, the weight of their discoveries pressing down on them. The way he operates, it's dangerous. He's pulling strings that could tear everything apart. If we expose him, we risk destabilizing the very thing we're trying to protect. Kai looked at her, his expression dark. We don't have a choice. We can't just let him continue. If we don't act, Lysra could lose everything. The peace we've worked so hard for could be a lie, and the lives of those who depend on us could be ruined. Laena closed her eyes, the reality of the situation sinking in. But what if it's too late? What if we can't stop him before it's all gone? Kai placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice firm. We stop him together. We take him down before he drags everyone into the abyss. As they continued to investigate, Laena and Kai uncovered more and more disturbing details about Velos' plans. His influence reached far beyond Lysra's borders, touching everything from the mining operations on neutral planets to covert military alliances with unknown factions. Velos was not just manipulating trade agreements, he was consolidating power in ways that no one had anticipated. The timing of all these moves is no coincidence, Laena said as she looked over the final piece of the puzzle. He's setting up a future where Lysra controls everything resources, trade, and influence, and he plans to do it under the banner of peaceful expansion. It's a lie, a carefully constructed lie. Kai's expression hardened. He's creating a new order, one that's entirely in his favor. The people of Lysra don't even realize what's happening, but we do, and we have to stop him before it's too late. With the stakes higher than ever, Laena and Kai knew that their next move would be decisive. They had no choice but to confront Velos directly. They couldn't allow him to continue manipulating the galaxy for his own gain. Laena felt a growing sense of resolve. She knew the risks. Taking on Velos wasn't just about exposing corruption, it was about fighting for the future of the galaxy. But even as she steeled herself for what lay ahead, doubts crept into her mind. What would it cost them? Could they really stop Velos without tearing apart everything they had worked for? In the quiet of their shared determination, Kai looked at her. We do this together, Laena. No matter what happens, we fight for what's right, for the people who don't even know they're at risk. Laena nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of their task. But as she stood up ready to face the darkest forces of their time, she knew one thing for certain: they could not let Velos continue his game. The future of the galaxy depended on it, and no matter the cost, they would stop him. The days following their discovery of Velos' sinister plans had passed in a blur of activity. Laena and Kai had been working tirelessly, gathering evidence and formulating a strategy to confront the ambassador. But as they began to prepare for the next phase of their plan, exposing Velos, they quickly realized that every step they took was being watched. A quiet unease settled over Laena as she navigated the corridors of the Arios space station. Her every move seemed to be tracked. The stares she caught from certain officials, the way conversations abruptly stopped. When she entered rooms, the subtle presence of security personnel at every turn, it was becoming clear that Velos' influence was far-reaching, and he knew they were onto him. Laena couldn't help but feel the weight of those watching eyes, the paranoia creeping into her thoughts. She had been a part of the diplomatic world for years, but this was different. This wasn't just politics, it was a fight for control, and Velos was using every tool at his disposal. She shared her concerns with Kai one evening after a long day of quietly gathering intel and observing the suspicious behavior of their colleagues. "They're watching us, Kai," Laena said, her voice low and urgent as she scanned the room for any signs of eavesdropping. "I can feel it. Every move we make is being tracked." Kai nodded, his expression grim. "I know. Velos has eyes everywhere. We've got to be careful. If we slip up now, it could be the end of everything." They both knew what was at stake. If Velos realized that Laena and Kai were onto him, it would be more than just their careers at risk. It would mean the collapse of everything they had worked toward, the peace, the fragile alliances, and the trust they had built with the other planets. Their next steps had to be calculated, methodical. Laena had spent countless hours in the depths of the Arios library, sifting through encrypted communications and hidden documents. With Kai's help, they had cracked some of the codes, revealing more about the shadowy dealings Velos had orchestrated. But even as they pieced things together, they realized that the information they needed to expose him wasn't going to come easily. The walls had ears, and every conversation was a potential risk. Kai leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. "We need to find a way to get to the archives. That's where the real proof is. But Velos has locked down all access to it. We need to move fast but quietly. We can't afford any mistakes." Laena nodded, her mind racing. She knew that every moment counted. They had to act, but they had to do so without drawing attention. Their every move needed to be cloaked in secrecy, and they needed to be ready for anything Velos might throw at them. Velos, of course, had anticipated that someone would eventually figure out his game. He had set the stage for this confrontation long ago, and now as Laena and Kai inched closer to the truth, he began his counterattack. The first blow came in the form of subtle manipulation, a quiet smear campaign within the diplomatic circles. Laena began to hear whispers about her loyalty, her integrity being questioned. She was branded as a loose cannon by some, a traitor to her people by others. It was a calculated move designed to isolate her, to make her seem untrustworthy in the eyes of the very people she had worked so hard to build relationships with. Kai watched as Lena's frustration grew with each passing day. The whispers were relentless, and they were beginning to erode the confidence she had once enjoyed among the other ambassadors. Velos knew exactly how to target her. The rumors spread like wildfire, and soon Laena found herself standing alone in meetings, her voice drowned out by the increasing animosity. "I can't believe this is happening," Laena muttered one evening, her hands trembling as she read through another round of disparaging reports. "How did it get this bad?" Kai's eyes were hard, his jaw set. "It's Velos. He's trying to undermine everything you've worked for. He's playing on their fears, turning them against you." Laena shook her head, frustration evident in her expression. "But I've done nothing wrong. All I've ever wanted is to bring peace, to protect the interests of all the planets, not just Lysra. Why would they believe this?" Kai placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Because Velos is manipulating them. He's using your own good intentions against you. But we know the truth. We can't let him win." The pressure mounted as the days wore on. Laena and Kai had been forced to go underground, meeting in secret locations and communicating in coded messages. Every time they tried to make progress, Velos countered their moves, always staying one step ahead. Laena couldn't help but feel the growing strain on her and Kai's relationship. The political tensions were high and the personal stakes were even higher. Every decision they made felt like a balancing act. They were fighting a war on two fronts, one for the truth and one for their relationship. One evening, as they sat in a dimly lit room poring over more encrypted data, Laena spoke up, her voice breaking the silence. "Kai, this is tearing us apart. The stress, the lies. I can't do this anymore." Kai turned to her, his expression softening. "You don't have to do this alone. I'm with you every step of the way. But we can't let Velos win. We've come too far. Honoree." She met his gaze, and for a moment all the political games, the corruption and the threats seemed to melt away. It was just the two of them, sitting in the quiet of the room, trying to make sense of the chaos around them. But Laena knew that their relationship was now more than just a personal matter. It had become part of the battle. Every decision, every step they took would have consequences for both the peace of the galaxy and their own future. As the pressure continued to mount, the final confrontation with Velos loomed on the horizon. They had uncovered enough evidence to expose him, but now they had to act quickly. There was no room for mistakes. "We can't keep playing his game," Kai said, determination hardening his voice. "We have the proof. It's time to end this." Laena nodded, her resolve hardening. "We'll do it together. We bring this to light no matter the cost." They knew that taking down Velos wouldn't be easy. He had entrenched himself in the fabric of Lysra's political system, and exposing him would not only risk their careers, it could plunge the entire galaxy into chaos. But they had no choice. The truth had to come out, and they were the only ones who could make it happen. As they prepared to face Velos one last time, Laena realized that everything had led to this moment. The political battle, the personal stakes, and the bond that had formed between her and Kai, everything was about to be tested. The future of the galaxy rested on their shoulders, and they had to be ready for whatever Velos might throw at them. And with that resolve, they stepped into the darkness, ready to fight not just for their future, but for the future of every world they had sworn to protect. The tension on the Arios station had reached a boiling point. Laena had known this day was coming, the day when Velos would make his move to discredit her. He was playing a dangerous game, and he had no intention of backing down. For the past few weeks, Laena had been receiving anonymous messages, threats that felt more real with every passing hour, and now those threats were no longer whispered in the shadows. They were being broadcast in full view. Velos had unleashed a smear campaign against her, using his considerable influence in the media and among the other diplomats to paint her as a traitor to her people. The accusations ranged from simple mistrust of Lysra's peace process to allegations of corruption and collusion with foreign powers. The political attacks were sophisticated, calculated. They aimed not just to damage her reputation, but to undermine her credibility in front of the entire galaxy. Laena could feel the weight of the accusations pressing down on her as she walked through the halls of the station. Whispers followed her wherever she went, and eyes that once held admiration now regarded her with suspicion. She had worked so hard to build relationships to earn trust, but it felt like it was all slipping through her fingers. The whispers became louder, and her role in the negotiations became clouded by doubt. One evening, as she sat in her quarters, scanning the latest reports from other ambassadors, she received a message from Kai. He was waiting for her in their usual meeting spot away from prying eyes. She immediately made her way there, knowing that their collaboration was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. "I saw the report," Kai said, his voice low and serious when she arrived. "Valos has gone public with the accusations. They're making it look like you're trying to sabotage the peace process." Laena sighed, sinking into a chair. "I knew it was coming, but I didn't think it would be this obvious. Why is he doing this?" "Why now?" Kai shook his head, his jaw tight. "It's a strategy. He's trying to discredit you before you can expose him. He knows that if the truth gets out, his entire scheme will fall apart. He's using your position against you, turning everything you've worked for into a weapon." Laena clenched her fists, her mind racing. "This isn't just about me, it's about everything. Lysra's reputation, the peace process, all of it. If they start believing his lies, everything we've done could unravel. And once that happens, it'll be impossible to fix." Velos had always been a master of public relations. He knew that by turning the diplomatic community against Laena, he could weaken her resolve and isolate her from the very people she had been trying to protect. His tactics were brutal but effective, publicly airing dirty laundry, exaggerating minor mistakes, and casting doubt on her integrity. He wasn't just trying to defeat her in private. No, this was a public execution designed to make her appear as a threat to the stability of the galaxy. For Laena, this was more than just a political attack. It was a personal blow. She had always prided herself on being honest, on doing what was right. But now her every action was being scrutinized under a microscope, and the fabric of trust she had spent years building was quickly being torn apart. "Do you think they'll believe him?" Laena asked, her voice heavy with doubt. "What if the other delegations start turning on me? What if I've lost everything?" Kai stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "No one knows you like I do, Laena. You've worked hard to earn the trust of the people here. Velos can't just erase that. You've got to stay focused. We've uncovered enough to stop him." Laena looked up at him, searching his face for any hint of uncertainty, but all she saw was determination. "I don't know if I can keep going like this. The pressure, it's unbearable." Kai's grip tightened. "You don't have to do it alone. I'm with you every step of the way. But we have to act now. We can't let Velos win." Lena's heart was torn between her responsibilities and the personal connection she had with Kai. The relationship they had built had become a source of strength, but now it was also a source of tension. Their growing feelings for each other only complicated matters further. They both knew that the political stakes were higher than ever, and yet their emotions were pulling them in different directions. Could they continue their relationship in the midst of such turmoil? Would it hinder their work, or could it become the driving force they needed to succeed? "I don't know if I can do both," Laena admitted, her voice trembling slightly as she sat beside Kai. "I want to fight for peace for Lysra, but I also want us. I don't know if I can keep this balance." Kai turned to her, his eyes soft but determined. "You don't have to choose between us and the mission. We're in this together. Whatever happens, we do it together." But Laena couldn't shake the feeling that their personal connection was becoming more of a liability than a strength. How could they maintain their professional composure when their hearts were so intertwined in the outcome? And how could they continue to fight for the truth when the very people they were trying to protect were questioning their loyalty? As the weeks passed, the political fallout from Velos' smear campaign began to spread. Laena found herself isolated from many of the other diplomats, her credibility in tatters. The pressure was unbearable. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that Velos was playing a dangerous game, one that could have consequences far beyond just her career. If she allowed him to win, the entire peace process would be at risk, and with it the lives of countless people. Kai stood beside her throughout it all, offering his support and his strength. Together they decided to take the fight directly to Velos. They had uncovered enough evidence of his corruption and manipulation. Now it was time to expose him for the fraud he truly was. The decision was not easy. Velos was a formidable opponent, one who had entrenched himself deeply in the political systems of multiple planets. But Laena knew that if they didn't act now, everything they had worked for would be lost. They couldn't allow Velos to control the narrative any longer. As they prepared for the final confrontation with Velos, Laena and Kai realized that their relationship would be tested in ways they had never imagined. The political forces at play were far more dangerous than they had initially thought, and the consequences of failure were dire. But in the end, Laena knew one thing for sure: she couldn't do this without Kai by her side. Together, they would expose the truth no matter the cost. And in doing so, they would show the galaxy that even in the darkest of times, hope and love could still prevail. The digital screens flickered in the dim light of Laena's quarters, casting eerie shadows across the room. After weeks of secretive work, countless hours spent decoding encrypted messages and unraveling the twisted web Velos had created, Laena and Kai had finally found what they had been searching for: undeniable proof of Velos' betrayal. It was a smoking gun, one that could bring down his entire operation and expose the conspiracy to the galaxy. Laena stared at the screen in front of her, the documents and communications scrolling past as her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Every word seemed to confirm her worst fears. Velos had not only manipulated the political landscape of Lysra, but he had also been secretly working with corrupt corporate entities across the galaxy. His deals were far-reaching, involving everything from resource exploitation to military alliances that bypassed the peaceful agreements they had been trying to broker. This wasn't just a diplomatic conspiracy, it was a coordinated effort to seize power. "This is it," Laena whispered, her voice barely audible as she processed the gravity of their discovery. "This will change everything." Kai, who had been standing by her side, leaning over her shoulder to examine the evidence, nodded gravely. "We have everything we need. Velos won't be able to deny this. If we expose him, his entire network will collapse. But we have to be careful." Lena's mind raced as the weight of the situation settled over her. They had what they needed, but they couldn't just hand it over recklessly. This information was explosive, and in the wrong hands it could be twisted, hidden, or destroyed before it could ever reach the public. The stakes had never been higher. "We need to get this to the right people," Laena said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "We can't let anyone, especially Velos, get their hands on it. If he knows what we found, he'll do everything in his power to bury it." Kai looked at her, his expression firm but filled with concern. "We've built trust with some of the other ambassadors, but can we really rely on them? Now Velos has his fingers in so many pies it's hard to know who's still on our side." Laena sighed, rubbing her temples. "We have to hope. If we've learned anything over the past few weeks, it's that we can't do this alone. We'll need to bring in the ones who've shown loyalty, the ones who have nothing to gain from Velos' agenda. But we have to move quickly. The longer we wait, the more likely it is that Velos will find out what we're planning." The decision to act came swiftly. They couldn't afford to sit idly by any longer. Armed with the irrefutable evidence, Laena and Kai reached out to their most trusted allies, the ambassadors they knew they could rely on. Together, they would bring Velos to justice. But as the pieces of the plan fell into place, they realized that Velos wasn't going to let this happen without a fight. The moment Laena sent the message to their allies, she knew that Velos would be watching, waiting. And sure enough, within hours, the political landscape began to shift again. The first sign that Velos was aware of their actions came in the form of a warning, a direct threat delivered to Laena through an anonymous communication channel. "I know what you're planning, Laena," the message read. "You've been a fool to think you could expose me. If you move forward with this, you will regret it." Kai clenched his fist when he saw the message. "This is what we were expecting. He won't let us take him down without a fight." Lena's face was stone cold as she read the message. "He won't just sit back. He'll come after us, and the people who've been helping us. We have to be prepared." Kai nodded grimly. "Velos has power, but we have something he doesn't: truth, and allies who are ready to back us up." As they moved forward with their plan, it became clear that Velos wasn't just going to sit back and allow his empire to crumble. He began to use every tool at his disposal to undermine Laena and Kai's efforts. The smear campaign intensified, with accusations being made publicly about Laena's loyalty and integrity. He twisted their every move, painting them as enemies of the very peace they had worked to protect. Laena could feel the pressure mounting. The weight of Velos' retaliation was beginning to have a tangible effect on her, both professionally and personally. She had never imagined that her fight for peace would lead her to such an intense and personal battle. But the deeper they got, the more they realized that Velos's manipulation went beyond just political scheming. It was personal. As the days went by, Laena and Kai found themselves under increasing pressure. Velos's operatives were everywhere. Every meeting they attended, every conversation they had, seemed to be under surveillance. Their every move was scrutinized, and they could feel the walls closing in around them. Late one night, as they sat in a small, secure room, Kai turned to Laena, his expression full of concern. "We've done everything we can, but the pressure is mounting. Velos is pushing back harder than we expected. If this keeps up, we might lose the support of the very people we're trying to protect." Laena took a deep breath, steeling herself against the uncertainty. "We can't back down now. We have the truth on our side. If we stop now, everything we've worked for will have been for nothing. We'll have to face him head on." Kai's eyes softened as he looked at her. "I know. I'm with you. But the truth is, this will change everything. The peace we've worked so hard for, it might never be the same again." Laena felt a pang of doubt, but it was quickly replaced by determination. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that we do what's right, not what's easy. We've come this far together, and we'll finish this together." The final confrontation was inevitable. As Velos's retaliation grew stronger, Laena and Kai knew they had no choice but to act. They had uncovered the truth, and now it was time to expose it. The fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders, and they would not back down. But the battle was not just political, it was personal. As Laena and Kai prepared to face Velos, they realized that their relationship too would be tested in ways they had never imagined. They had been working together as allies, as partners in diplomacy, but now they had to face the harshest reality of all their love and trust for each other would be put to the ultimate test. Laena turned to Kai, her eyes full of resolve. "We can't lose sight of what we've built. No matter what happens, we're in this together." Kai nodded, his grip tightening on her hand. "Together. And we'll make sure Velos doesn't get away with this." The final act was about to begin. The truth would come to light, and with it, the fate of the galaxy. Laena stood in the shadow of a massive window overlooking the sprawling expanse of Arios. The station was buzzing with activity, but for Laena, the peace felt like an illusion, shattered by the most recent blow she and Kai had received. Velos had finally made his move. The smear campaign was just the beginning. He had turned his attention to Laena's allies, targeting the very relationships she had worked so tirelessly to build. The first signs of this attack came in the form of subtle but strategic actions. Representatives who had once been staunch supporters of Laena began to distance themselves. Some were approached privately and pressured with threats of losing lucrative trade deals if they continued to back Laena's efforts. Others were simply convinced by carefully crafted propaganda, questioning Laena's loyalty to her people and the integrity of the mission. Velos had put his machinations into full motion, and the fallout from his influence was already spreading across the station. Kai, who had been working with Laena to shore up their alliances, noticed the change immediately. He rushed into her quarters, his face tight with concern. "We're losing them, Laena. They've turned. Velos is playing his cards, and we're losing ground fast." Laena's heart sank. The people she had trusted, those who had pledged their loyalty to Lysra's cause, were now wavering under the pressure. She had always believed that truth would be enough to win over the hearts and minds of others, but now it felt like nothing she had done would matter. "Why? Why is he doing this?" Laena asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might make the reality too unbearable to face. Kai's jaw clenched, frustration written all over his face. "Because it's his only option. He's backed into a corner, and if he doesn't act now, everything he's worked for will crumble. He's trying to tear apart our alliances, isolate us, and force us to fight alone." The tension in Laena's chest grew heavier with every word. Velos knew that if Laena and her allies united and exposed him, he would lose everything. So he was using the one thing that had always been his greatest strength, his ability to manipulate others. And now it wasn't just a political game, it was a personal war. Velos's strategy was simple yet brutal: divide and conquer. He didn't just target Laena directly, he sought to destroy the foundation of trust she had built with others. His operatives infiltrated her allies' networks, whispering doubts and planting seeds of mistrust. As the diplomatic community began to turn against her, Laena had to fight on two fronts, defending her integrity and protecting the truth she had fought so hard to uncover. There has to be a way to get them back, Laena said, her voice desperate as she met Kai's gaze. We can't fight this alone. I can't stand by and watch Velos tear apart everything we've built. Kai walked over to the window, his back to her. His voice was calm but resolute when he spoke. We have to remind them of what's at stake. Velos is playing a long game. He knows that if we fall, the peace process dies with us. But he's underestimated how much people believe in what we're trying to achieve. Laena turned to him, eyes full of determination. We need to expose him, Kai, and we need to do it fast before he turns even more of our allies against us. But as they both knew, the plan to expose Velos wasn't as simple as it seemed. Velos had made sure his every move was backed by layers of protection, propaganda, misinformation, and subtle threats. He had weaponized the political landscape, and Laena was fighting not just for truth, but for survival. Amidst the chaos, Laena discovered that the betrayal ran even deeper than she had imagined. One of the people she had trusted most, someone who had once been her confidant, had been secretly working with Velos. A trusted advisor, someone who had promised to stand by her, had been feeding Velos information, undermining her efforts from the inside. The betrayal cut deeper than she could have ever anticipated. This wasn't just about politics anymore. This was personal. The person who had played her most, who had once sworn loyalty to the cause, had turned their back on everything she stood for. The realization made Laena sick to her stomach. You've got to be kidding me, she muttered, her eyes scanning through the encrypted communications she had intercepted. The name of the traitor stared back at her from the screen, the words too sharp, too painful to comprehend. Why would they do this? Why betray us now when everything is on the line? Kai, standing beside her, placed a hand on her shoulder. It's hard to accept, Laena, but Velos is using everything he can to break us down. He's exploiting every weakness, every crack in our system. And that includes using our own people against us. Laena felt the weight of the betrayal heavy in her chest. She had placed her trust in this person, believed that they were fighting alongside her for the greater good. And now she realized that even those closest to her were vulnerable to the corrupting influence of Velos. As Velos's tactics grew more desperate, Laena and Kai realized that their relationship too would be tested in ways they hadn't anticipated. The pressure of the political situation combined with the personal betrayal began to strain their bond. Laena, who had always kept her emotions in check, found it harder and harder to separate her personal feelings from the work they were doing. And Kai, despite his unwavering support, was beginning to feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him as well. One night, as they sat in their makeshift headquarters surrounded by maps, encrypted files, and political documents, Laena spoke softly, her voice betraying the exhaustion she felt. I don't know how much longer I can do this, Kai. The betrayal, the lies. It's all becoming too much, and I don't want to risk us too. Kai looked at her, his expression softening. We're in this together, Laena. No matter what happens, I'm not going anywhere. But you can't let this destroy what we've built, not just the mission, but us. Lena's eyes met his, and for a moment she saw the same determination in his eyes that she had seen when they first started this journey. They had fought side by side, and now they would face the ultimate test. The truth would come to light, and no matter the cost, they had to stand together. Laena and Kai, with their last remaining allies, formulated their final plan. They had uncovered enough evidence to bring Velos down, but the challenge now was getting that evidence to the right people in the right way before Velos could strike back. As the confrontation loomed, Laena knew that everything, her relationship with Kai, her mission, the future of Lysra, was on the line. It was no longer just about politics or diplomacy. It was about protecting everything they had worked for. It was about ensuring that the truth would be heard no matter the cost. As they prepared for the final confrontation, Laena turned to Kai, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. This ends now. We're bringing Velos down, and we'll make sure no one forgets what he's done. Kai nodded, his hand finding hers, his grip tight. Together, we'll bring him down together. The galaxy was on the brink of destruction, and Laena and Kai knew that in order to preserve the fragile peace they had fought for, they would have to make difficult sacrifices. As they stared at the evidence they had gathered, the truth that Velos had manipulated entire civilizations for his gain, the weight of their decision became painfully clear. The future of the galaxy depended on what they were willing to give up. Laena sat in silence, her eyes fixed on the holographic projections of the various star systems. The diplomatic network they had spent years building now teetered on the edge of collapse. Velos' influence had corrupted everything, and to expose him, Laena knew they might lose everything they had worked for: the trust of their allies, the peace they had carefully crafted. The sacrifices ahead were inevitable. Kai stood beside her, looking out at the stars, his expression as somber as hers. "We've come so far, Laena," he said quietly. "But to stop Velos, we may have to let go of the very thing we're fighting for. The trust, the peace, everything we've built." Laena nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of the decision. "I know. We've always believed that peace comes from cooperation, from unity. But to stop Velos, we might have to shatter those alliances. We may even have to sacrifice our personal ties to protect the greater good." Kai turned to her, his gaze intense. "Do you think they'll understand? The cultures we've tried to protect, will they see why we did it?" Laena hesitated. She had worked her entire life to forge these relationships, to build trust and mutual respect between vastly different civilizations. And yet now she was faced with the painful reality that to preserve peace, she might have to destroy what she had spent years creating. "I hope they will, but it's a gamble. If we succeed, they'll understand. If we fail, we'll be seen as traitors, the very thing Velos has painted us to be." In the midst of these dark thoughts, another reality settled in her relationship with Kai. The bond they shared had deepened in ways neither of them had expected, and as their journey together grew more perilous, their feelings for each other had become even more complicated. She had never thought that love could coexist with such a monumental cause. But now, with everything hanging in the balance, Laena wondered, could their love survive the weight of these sacrifices? "The truth, it's bigger than us, isn't it?" Laena whispered. Kai's expression softened as he reached for her hand. "It always has been, but that doesn't mean we're not in this together. We fight for the same reason: the future of the galaxy. The question is, can we still hold on to what we've built, or will this sacrifice be too much?" The pressure of their mission was growing. They both knew that their chances of success were slim. Velos was a master manipulator, and now he was more dangerous than ever. He had eyes everywhere. The stakes had never been higher, but Laena and Kai were determined to see it through. They could not let Velos win. As Laena and Kai continued their fight against Velos, the struggle became more brutal. They worked tirelessly to expose his manipulations, knowing that each step they took could be their last. Every document, every piece of evidence they uncovered seemed to put them closer to the truth, but also put them at greater risk. One night, as they worked in a secure room, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Kai turned sharply, hand instinctively reaching for the weapon at his side, but it was too late. Velos had anticipated their every move, and his retaliation had begun. A group of Velos's agents stormed into the room, weapons raised. Kai and Laena barely had time to react before a blinding flash of light filled the room. Laena's heart raced as she scrambled to her feet, barely avoiding the oncoming blast. She and Kai fought back with everything they had, but they were outnumbered. Velos's forces had them cornered. "You're too late, Laena." One of the agents sneered, his weapon trained on her. "Velos will win. You can't stop him." But Laena didn't give up. With a surge of determination, she managed to break free, knocking the weapon from his hand and disarming him. "We won't stop. We can't stop. We'll expose the truth no matter what." As the fight raged on, Laena and Kai made their escape. They had survived the ambush, but the danger had only just begun. Velos was relentless. His forces were everywhere, closing in on them from all sides. Every decision now felt like it could be their last. But they couldn't stop. Not now. The final confrontation with Velos was inevitable. Laena and Kai had gathered enough evidence to bring him down, but Velos wasn't going to let that happen without one last attempt to destroy them. He had them cornered, and he was ready to do whatever it took to protect his empire. In a desperate act, Velos orchestrated a plan to eliminate Laena once and for all. He ordered her assassination, sending his most trusted agents to carry out the task. But the plan failed. In a stunning turn of events, the would-be assassin was thwarted by an unexpected ally. Kai had tracked down Laena just in time, rescuing her from the clutches of death. But even as Laena breathed a sigh of relief, the situation grew even more dire. Velos was not finished. He orchestrated a daring kidnapping, taking Laena captive in a final desperate attempt to break her resolve. It was then that Laena realized just how far Velos was willing to go to protect his twisted vision of control. As Laena was held captive, she fought with every ounce of strength she had. But it was Kai who ultimately found her navigating through the maze of Velos' security to rescue her. Together they escaped barely. But the consequences of Velos' actions weren't over. In one final attempt to break their resolve, Velos framed Laena for crimes she hadn't committed, trying to have her locked away in prison for the rest of her life. The public outcry was swift, but it was also a cruel reminder of the stakes they faced. The truth once again hung in the balance. Fortunately, with Kai's help, the evidence was revealed, and Laena was exonerated. Velos' last-ditch efforts had failed, but the cost had been high. The trust between allies had been strained, and the battle for peace had cost more than Laena and Kai had ever imagined. Yet in the end, they had succeeded. The truth had been exposed, and Velos had been defeated. Laena and Kai stood together in the aftermath, battered but victorious. The galaxy had been saved, but at what cost? They had sacrificed so much trust, relationships, even their own peace of mind. And yet, as they looked to the future, they knew that their fight was far from over. The truth had come to light, but the path forward would be just as difficult. The galaxy was fragile, and rebuilding the trust they had lost would take time. But they had one another, and together they could face whatever challenges came their way. For the first time in a long time, Laena allowed herself to smile, her hand finding Kai's. "We did it," she said softly. "We've saved the galaxy." Kai squeezed her hand gently. "Together, and we'll keep fighting together for as long as it takes." Their journey was far from over, but in that moment they both knew they had overcome the greatest challenge of all. Laena and Kai had reached a critical point in their mission, and the discovery of the evidence that could bring Velos down was within their grasp. They had been working in secrecy for weeks, gathering intelligence and piecing together the pieces of Velos' vast web of lies and corruption. But as they ventured deeper into the heart of Velos' empire, they quickly realized that the road to exposing him would not be easy. Every step they took brought them closer to the truth and to a dangerous web of deception that could cost them their lives. The first of many dangers emerged when Laena and Kai infiltrated one of Velos' heavily guarded facilities. They had managed to slip past security, but the moment they started gathering documents, alarms rang through the halls. They were caught, and the chaos that followed was like nothing they had ever faced before. Armed guards swarmed the area, and Laena barely managed to escape the facility with her life. "We're running out of time," Kai whispered as they hid behind a wall, listening to the sound of footsteps echoing down the corridor. "If we don't get this evidence to the right people, Velos will get away with everything." Laena wiped the sweat from her brow, her heart racing. "We can't afford to be caught, Kai. If he finds out we're onto him, everything will be destroyed. We've come this far, we can't turn back now." They knew that the stakes were high, but as they snuck deeper into Velos' fortress, they were forced to confront the ever-present danger lurking at every turn. They had to stay one step ahead, relying on their wits and the trust they had built between them to navigate the traps Velos had set. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about making sure the truth would be exposed no matter what. Velos had already begun to retaliate. His operatives were everywhere, watching, listening, and waiting for Laena and Kai to slip up. As they moved closer to the evidence they needed, the threats became more direct and more lethal. Velos knew they were after him, and he wouldn't go down without a fight. The first major strike came when they were ambushed by Velos' personal assassins. The quiet hum of the station was shattered by the sound of blaster fire, and in a heartbeat the room they were in was surrounded. Laena and Kai barely escaped, but not without sustaining injuries. Kai's arm was grazed by a shot, and Lena's face was bruised from a blow to the side. They were being hunted now. "Velos knows we're getting closer to the truth." Kai said, his voice strained with pain, but filled with determination. "He won't stop until we're dead or discredited. We have to move fast." Laena glanced around, her eyes scanning the room. "We can't let him win, Kai. We've come too far to turn back. We'll have to be smarter, faster. We can't let him catch us off guard again." But despite their best efforts, Velos was relentless. He used every trick in the book to make them feel the weight of their choices. He was manipulating the political system, turning their allies against them, and orchestrating more attacks. The deeper they got into his operation, the more dangerous it became. Yet Laena and Kai refused to back down, knowing the galaxy's future depended on the truth coming to light. The situation took a more dangerous turn when Laena was captured by Velos's forces. It had been a carefully orchestrated trap. One moment they were racing toward the final piece of the puzzle, and the next Laena was pulled from Kai's side and dragged away by armed agents. She was blindfolded, her hands bound, and she had no idea where they were taking her. As she struggled against her captors, she knew she had to stay calm. There was no way she could give up now, not when the truth was so close. But the fear was real. Velos wasn't just a politician. He was a ruthless tyrant who would do whatever it took to maintain his control. If he thought killing her would silence the truth, he would do it without hesitation. Kai, however, was not far behind. The moment he realized Laena had been taken, he went into full survival mode. He tracked her captors through the maze of tunnels and security checkpoints, knowing that every second counted. It was a race against time with Lena's life on the line. "I won't let him take you from me," Kai muttered to himself as he carefully avoided detection, his every step calculated. "We're in this together, and I won't let him break us." The moment he found her locked away in a small isolated cell, it was clear how close they had come to losing everything. Laena was bruised, her clothes torn, but her spirit had not been broken. She looked up as Kai broke the lock and rushed to her side. "You found me," she whispered, her voice filled with relief and exhaustion. "I knew you would." Kai pulled her into an embrace, his heart pounding with relief. "I'll always find you, Laena. We can't lose each other, not now. Not after everything we've been through." But their escape wasn't without its challenges. Velos' forces were closing in, and they had to fight their way out of the facility. There were close calls, moments when they both thought they wouldn't make it. But together they managed to escape barely. Laena and Kai's bond had never been stronger. They had faced death together, and now they stood united, knowing that they could not stop until Velos was exposed for the monster he truly was. Their mission wasn't just about surviving. It was about making sure the galaxy knew the truth and that Velos would be held accountable for his crimes. As they prepared to reveal the final evidence, they knew that Velos would try one last time to silence them. But they had survived too much to back down now. With the truth in their hands, they set their course for the final confrontation. The road ahead was still perilous, but Laena and Kai knew they could face anything together. Their love, their resolve, and their commitment to justice had brought them this far. And as they prepared for the final battle, they knew the stakes had never been higher. Lena's heart sank as she stared at the encrypted transmission in front of her. The evidence was irrefutable. One of her most trusted allies, someone she had worked alongside for years, had turned against her. Ambassador Kalen, a figure she had once considered a cornerstone of her efforts to unite the galaxy, had secretly been feeding information to Velos. Kai Laena said, her voice shaking with disbelief. "I never imagined..." "Kalen. He was supposed to be on our side. He's been helping us all along." And now this Kai stood next to her, his face grim as he read the transmission. His eyes were hard and his hand clenched into a fist. Velos must have gotten to him. He's always been good at manipulating people, pulling strings in the shadows. Kalen's betrayal might have been a result of pressure, but it's still a betrayal. We can't ignore this. Lena's mind raced, trying to make sense of it. But why? Why would he turn against us now when we're so close to exposing Velos? Kai turned to her, his gaze softening. "You said it yourself, Laena. Velos is desperate. He'll do anything to survive. If he got to Kalen, it means he'll stop at nothing to tear us apart. I have to confront him," Laena said, her voice tinged with both anger and heartbreak. "I can't believe this is happening, but I have to face him. We can't let this betrayal destroy everything we've worked for." The realization of Kalen's betrayal shook Laena to her core. She had trusted him, relied on him for vital information and support. Now that trust had been shattered, she couldn't help but question the others who had stood by her. How many more might be swayed by Velos's influence? The questions of loyalty began to cloud her every decision. "How do we move forward?" Kai Laena asked, her voice cracking slightly. "Can we trust anyone anymore?" Kai placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We can't let this break us. Velos is trying to divide us, to make us lose faith in the ones who are truly on our side. We've fought too hard for this. Maybe Laena replied, her eyes downcast, but this changes everything. The people I trusted, they've all turned. I don't know who I can trust anymore. Kai's voice was firm, determined. You've got me, and I'll be here for you no matter what. We can't let Velos tear us apart, but we'll have to stay focused. The truth is still out there. We can't let his betrayal stop us from doing what's right. As Laena and Kai worked to recover from the shock of the betrayal, Velos unleashed his next wave of attacks. He knew that Lena's position was becoming increasingly precarious, and now with her network of allies weakening, he saw an opportunity to strike. The first sign of his political assault came when Laena received a message from one of her remaining allies, a hesitant voice warning her that Velos was already spreading rumors about her and Kai. He was portraying them as extremists, power-hungry leaders who were willing to sacrifice everything for their cause, including the future of the galaxy. The message was laced with threats. If you don't stop now, everything you've built will crumble. Velos had turned the diplomatic community against them, using every piece of leverage he had to ruin their credibility. His manipulation was so effective that even the strongest allies, Laena, had those who had once supported her unconditionally, were beginning to waver. He's coming after everything, Laena muttered, her fists clenched in frustration as she looked over the latest reports. He's using his influence to paint us as enemies of peace. It's not enough for him to stop us. He's trying to destroy everything we've worked for. Kai shook his head, his voice low and resolute. We knew this was coming, but we can't back down now. The galaxy needs us to finish what we started. As Laena and Kai prepared for the next phase of their plan, the pressure mounted. Every decision felt like a gamble. Velos's forces were closing in, and the attacks, both political and personal, grew more intense. Laena had always prided herself on her ability to navigate the complex web of intergalactic diplomacy, but now it felt like the walls were closing in. The constant threat of betrayal, the pressure from allies who were unsure whether to stay with her, and the looming danger of Velos' retaliation, it all weighed heavily on her. We're not going to survive this unless we make some hard choices, Laena said, her voice filled with exhaustion. We can't keep fighting without making sacrifices. I don't know what the cost is going to be, but I fear that the truth might not be enough to stop Velos. Kai looked at her, his expression unwavering. We'll do whatever it takes, Laena. Together. We don't have a choice. We can't let him tear this galaxy apart. In the midst of these escalating tensions, Velos orchestrated one final devastating blow. Laena was taken captive. His forces had been lying in wait, and when she least expected it, they struck. She was trapped, blindfolded and bound, taken deep into the heart of Velos' stronghold. The harsh reality of her situation set in. She was alone, her fate uncertain, and everything she had fought for seemed to hang by a thread. You can't escape now, Velos said with cold satisfaction as he appeared before her. You've been a thorn in my side for far too long, Laena. You thought you could expose me, but now you'll pay the price for your meddling? Laena glared at him, refusing to let her fear show. You can't win, Velos. The truth will come out. You'll be stopped. Velos laughed, a low, menacing sound. You're too late. The galaxy already believes the lies I've spun. It's over. You're finished. But even as Laena was locked away, unable to break free, Kai was on his way. He tracked her through the dark corridors, finding her just in time. With a fury born of desperation, he fought his way through Velos' defenses, taking down agents one by one. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he reached her, his hands shaking as he unlocked her cell. Laena, he breathed, relief flooding his voice. You're okay. We're getting out of here. Now. She smiled weakly, her heart swelling with gratitude. I knew you'd come for me. Together they made their escape, but the danger wasn't over. Velos would stop at nothing to crush them. But now they had a new fire in their hearts, a renewed sense of purpose. They were still alive, still fighting, and they weren't going to let Velos destroy everything they had worked for. As they raced to reveal the final pieces of the puzzle and expose Velos once and for all, Laena and Kai knew they couldn't afford any more mistakes. Their love, their trust in one another, and their commitment to the truth had brought them this far, and it was their strongest weapon against Velos' tyranny. The final confrontation was coming, and Laena and Kai were ready to face it no matter the cost. The tension was palpable in the air as Laena and Kai prepared for the final confrontation. Every step they had taken in the past months had led to this moment. The evidence was finally within their grasp, and with it the power to expose Velos for the fraud he was. But Velos, ever the master manipulator, had prepared his own counterattack. As Laena and Kai huddled in their secret safe house, the reality of the situation weighed heavily on them. Their mission had grown more perilous with each passing day, but now they had no choice but to move forward. Velos was closing in on them, and they couldn't afford any more mistakes. "We need to act quickly," Laena said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "Velos won't wait for us to make a move. He's already making his preparations. We can't let him get the upper hand again." Kai glanced over at her, his face etched with determination. "I know, but what if we don't make it? What if this ends with us being silenced?" Laena shook her head, her expression hardening. "We can't think like that. Velos has been manipulating the truth for far too long. Now it's our turn to expose him for the world to see. We won't back down no matter the cost." Velos knew that his time was running out. Laena and Kai were closing in on the final pieces of his treacherous empire, and he wasn't about to let them expose him without a fight. The final step in his plan was one of desperation. He would strike directly at them, using everything in his power to ensure their silence. "I've underestimated them for too long," Velos muttered to himself as he watched Laena and Kai's movements on his surveillance feed. "But no more. They won't leave this station alive." Velos had mobilized his most elite forces. His operatives trained in secrecy and subterfuge infiltrated every corner of the station. Laena and Kai were being watched, every move they made monitored closely. But even with this overwhelming force, Velos had one final, most dangerous weapon at his disposal, a devastating plan to discredit Laena and Kai once and for all. "Velos isn't just going to sit back and watch us take him down," Kai said, his eyes narrowing. "He's going to come after us directly. We need to be ready for whatever he throws at us." Laena nodded, her mind working quickly. "We've been playing defense for too long. It's time to take the fight to him." The final battle wasn't just a physical confrontation, it was a psychological one. Velos knew how to use the media, the diplomatic community, and even his own agents to turn the tides in his favor. Laena and Kai knew they couldn't allow themselves to be swept away by the chaos. They had to stay focused even as Velos ramped up his attacks. Laena's gaze hardened as she looked out at the dark expanse of space. "We've faced death before, but this time it's different. Velos is going all in. If we don't succeed, everything we've fought for will be lost." Kai stepped up beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We'll get through this. We're not alone. We have the truth on our side, and that's all we need." As the final showdown drew nearer, Velos made his move. He didn't just attack them with weapons, he attacked their very credibility. He publicly accused Laena and Kai of fabricating evidence and manipulating the galaxy for their own gain. His propaganda machine spun a web of lies designed to isolate them from their allies and turn the galaxy's opinion against them. The political arena became a battlefield as accusations flew, and Laena and Kai found themselves fighting not only for their lives but for their reputations. The galaxy they had worked so hard to unite was on the verge of falling apart. "Velos is turning the entire galaxy against us," Laena said, her voice thick with frustration as she watched the latest reports. "He's spinning the truth to make us look like the enemies. It's not just about our survival anymore. It's about saving everything we've worked for." Kai clenched his fists in anger. "He's trying to break us, Laena. He wants us to give up. But we can't. Not now. We have to stand strong." They knew that if they couldn't expose the truth in time, their mission would be a failure. Velos was counting on their doubt and fear to defeat them. But Laena and Kai were resolute. They would not let him win. The battle reached its peak when Velos took matters into his own hands. In one final attempt to crush them, he orchestrated a direct assault on their safe house. His forces stormed the building, and Laena and Kai were forced into a deadly game of cat and mouse. As the sound of explosions echoed in the distance, Kai grabbed Laena's arm. "We don't have much time. They're closing in on us." Laena's eyes were wild with determination. "We've come too far to back down now. We have to expose him, Kai. We have the evidence. We just need to get it to the right people." In a desperate move, Laena and Kai fought their way through the building, evading Velos agents at every turn. Each moment was a race against time, and the danger was greater than ever. The final confrontation was inevitable. As they reached the final room, the last piece of evidence in hand, Velos appeared. His cold, calculating gaze met theirs as he stepped forward, flanked by his most loyal followers. "You think you can win?" Velos sneered. "You think the galaxy will rally behind you after all the lies you've spread? You're nothing but pawns in a game you don't understand." Laena stood tall, her voice unwavering. "The truth will always come to light, Velos. Your reign of manipulation ends here." Kai stepped forward, his hand on his weapon. "We're done running. It's time for you to face the consequences of your actions." Velos chuckled darkly. "You're too late. The damage is done. The galaxy will never believe you." But it was then that Laena and Kai revealed the final piece of evidence, undeniable proof of Velos's crimes, a piece of the puzzle that Velos had no answer for. The truth spread like wildfire across the galaxy, and in the blink of an eye the political tides turned. Velos' empire crumbled as his lies were exposed. His supporters abandoned him, and his power evaporated in the face of the truth. It was over. Laena and Kai stood together in the aftermath, knowing that the battle had been won, but at a great cost. Their love, their trust, and their commitment to the truth had carried them through. And now as they looked toward the future, they knew that the road ahead would still be difficult. But for the first time in a long time, they allowed themselves to breathe, knowing they had saved the galaxy. "We did it," Laena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Kai squeezed her hand. "Together. We'll keep fighting for as long as it takes." Their journey wasn't over, but they had come out of the darkness stronger than ever. Laena and Kai had reached the final stage of their battle, one that would not only determine the fate of their mission, but the future of the galaxy itself. After months of planning, gathering evidence, and surviving countless obstacles, they had finally gathered the irrefutable proof needed to expose Velos's treachery. Now it was time for the final confrontation. The truth was in their hands, and they had no choice but to confront Velos directly. "We've made it this far," Laena said, her voice calm, but filled with resolve. "But the hardest part is yet to come. Velos will never surrender without a fight. We have to be ready for whatever he throws at us." Kai nodded, his face set with determination. "We've come too far to let him win now. The truth will be heard, and he will be held accountable for everything he's done. We can't let fear stop us." As they approached the location where they would face Velos, the weight of the situation settled in. They had no backup, no other option, only each other and the evidence they carried with them. It was now or never. When Laena and Kai finally confronted Velos, the room was filled with tension. He stood tall and composed as though he had anticipated their arrival. There was no fear in his eyes, only a cold, calculating look that made Lena's stomach twist. For the first time, she realized the full extent of his ruthlessness. "Did you think you could defeat me with these pathetic lies?" Velos sneered, his voice laced with venom. "You think the galaxy will side with you over me? You're nothing but pawns." Lena's hands trembled as she held up the evidence, the documents that exposed Velos' crimes and corruption. "It's over, Velos. Your empire of lies ends now. The truth is out. You can't escape this anymore." Kai stepped forward, his voice unwavering. "You underestimated us, and now you'll pay for everything you've done. Your reign ends today." Velos' face twisted with fury. "You think the galaxy will listen to you? The damage is done. The systems I've manipulated will back me up. You have no idea what you're up against." With those words, the fight took a darker turn. Velos activated a series of traps, activating hidden agents that rushed toward Laena, and Kai determined to stop them at all costs. As the battle raged on, Velos didn't relent. He fought back with everything he had, using every asset at his disposal. The political and military forces he had built over the years weren't just pawns, they were weapons. He wasn't simply fighting to save his position. He was fighting for survival, for everything he had worked so hard to build. "Get them," Velos shouted, his voice sharp and demanding. "They can't be allowed to expose me." Laena and Kai were outnumbered, but they fought on, using their wits and their skills to survive. It was clear that Velos' desperation made him more dangerous than ever. Each corner they turned, each step they took, they faced more traps, more attacks, more forces trying to crush them. "This isn't just about us anymore," Laena said, her breath heavy as she ducked behind cover. "This is about the future of the galaxy. We can't let him destroy everything we've worked for." Kai shot back with precision, his eyes scanning the room for their next move. We have to finish this. No more running. We expose him, and we end this once and for all. The fight with Velos reached a boiling point. Every move they made, every piece of evidence they revealed, he tried to turn the tables. He tried to manipulate the media, twist the truth, and use every political alliance he still had to turn the galaxy against them. But Laena and Kai were determined. The truth had to come out no matter the cost. In a final act of desperation, Velos unleashed his ultimate plan. He would use the one thing that could still hold power over Laena and Kai betrayal. He had been manipulating those closest to them, using agents embedded within their ranks to turn people against them. As the final pieces of Velos' operation fell into place, Laena and Kai found themselves fighting against not just Velos, but the very people they had trusted. "I knew you'd betray us," Laena muttered under her breath as she fought off one of Velos' agents. "You've been playing both sides the entire time." Kai was beside her, his voice filled with anger, but calm as ever. "He's been planning this for years. We just didn't see it coming. But it doesn't matter. We've got the truth. That's all we need." In the final moments of their struggle, as Velos attempted to escape with his remaining forces, Laena and Kai made a bold move. They activated the final part of their plan, broadcasting the truth to the entire galaxy. They hacked into the communications network and broadcasted Velos' crimes, his manipulation, and his betrayal to every corner of the galaxy. The truth spread faster than they had anticipated. The galaxy began to turn against Velos, and his supporters quickly fell away. No, Velos shouted in disbelief as the truth was exposed, his world crumbling before him. "This cannot be, you can't." But it was too late. The political machine he had so carefully crafted had crumbled. His empire was no more. With Velos' downfall, the galaxy began to heal. The systems that had been manipulated for so long started to rebuild their trust in each other. Laena and Kai had won, but it came at a tremendous cost. They had lost allies, faced betrayal, and fought through impossible odds to bring the truth to light. "We did it," Laena whispered, her voice full of exhaustion and relief. "It's over. We've won." Kai nodded, his eyes meeting hers with quiet understanding. "We didn't just win for us. We won for everyone. The galaxy is safe now." But even in victory, the question remained, what came next? Could Laena and Kai return to a life of peace after everything they had been through? Would the galaxy ever truly recover from the scars left by Velos' manipulation? As they stood together, the weight of their victory was clear. They had saved the galaxy, but it had changed them forever. What they had fought for and the truth they had exposed would continue to shape the future. But for now, Laena and Kai could breathe. They had done what they set out to do, and that was enough. Laena and Kai had done the impossible. They had torn down Velos' empire, exposing his lies and manipulation to the galaxy. But now that the dust had settled, they were faced with a new, even more challenging task, rebuilding what had been broken and ensuring that the galaxy could continue its journey toward peace. They stood on the balcony of their station, watching the stars as a quiet but heavy silence hung between them. The weight of the last few months of the battles, the betrayals, and the sacrifices was still fresh in their minds. "We did it, Kai," Laena whispered, her voice both filled with relief and sorrow. "But it's not over. The peace we fought for, it needs rebuilding. It's going to take time." Kai nodded, his eyes reflecting the same solemnity. "I know. Velos might be gone, but his influence is still there. We have to mend the wounds he left behind, and that's going to take more than just revealing the truth. We need to prove that we can be trusted again." After Velos' fall, the political landscape had shifted. The galaxy was in chaos, and systems that had once trusted Laena and Kai now questioned their ability to lead. There were factions large and small that had been manipulated into supporting Velos. These factions weren't easily swayed. They were hesitant, afraid of being caught in another web of lies. The first challenge Laena and Kai faced was the backlash. The world they had fought for was now fractured, and the trust they had once cultivated was being eroded. Diplomats who had once praised them now turned their backs, and once strong allies now hesitated to join them. They had to figure out how to rebuild these connections, how to restore the faith in them that had been shattered by years of Velos' manipulation. Laena exhaled sharply as she stood over the data console, reading the latest reports from different systems. "We can't ignore the damage that's been done, Kai. We need to show them that we're here to fix the fractures, not just push for our own victory." Kai looked over at her, his expression filled with understanding. It's going to take more than just words. We'll have to act with integrity, rebuild the relationships that were broken, and prove to the galaxy that we can be trusted. Laena turned to him, her resolve hardening. Then we'll do whatever it takes. We owe it to them to rebuild not just for us, but for the future of this galaxy. But we need to convince them, Kai. We need to convince the galaxy that peace is worth the effort. As Laena and Kai worked to rebuild the galaxy's fragile peace, they began to see how deep Velos' influence had truly gone. Even after his defeat, his supporters still remained in key positions, and many of the galaxy's systems continued to follow his ideals, wary of change and unconvinced by the new leadership. Do you think we can convince them that peace is worth the sacrifice? Laena asked, staring at the diplomatic reports from several planets that still refused to cooperate with their vision. How do we make sure that we don't fall into the same trap that Velos set up? Kai frowned, his mind working through the complexities. We need to build trust again, but this time we have to show them that our vision isn't about power. It's about collaboration, understanding. The mistakes Velos made were rooted in his greed and his desire to control. We can't make the same mistake. We need to lead with transparency. Laena nodded, deep in thought. And we need to prevent the same manipulations from happening again. If we can't build a foundation that is stronger than Velos' lies, we'll risk the same fate. As the political negotiations continued, Laena and Kai knew the road ahead would be difficult. The galaxy was still reeling from Velos' reign, and they were tasked with holding it all together. The scars from the last war would not heal overnight, and the trust they had lost would not come back easily. But Laena and Kai were resolute. The lessons they had learned from Velos' manipulation would serve as a foundation for their leadership. They couldn't allow the galaxy to fall back into the same trap. They had to create a system of checks and balances, ensuring that no one, especially them, could take control again. Their leadership would have to be about balance, cooperation, and transparency. We'll rebuild, Kai said, determination clear in his voice. But it won't be easy. It never is. We have to make sure every culture has a voice and every world has a place in the future. Laena placed a hand on his arm. We'll make it work. Together. We've already survived the worst. This is just the beginning of something new. Through it all, Laena and Kai's relationship had been tested in ways they never imagined. The pressures of their mission, the dangers they had faced together, and the sacrifices they had made had forged their bond into something unbreakable. Yet now that the war was over and the future of the galaxy was uncertain, they both knew that their personal journey was far from finished. In the quiet moments after the dust settled, when the weight of their actions had finally begun to sink in, Kai looked at Laena with a mix of tenderness and understanding. We've been through so much, haven't we? But now we get to build something new. Laena smiled softly, her eyes filled with love and admiration. Yes, we do. Together we'll rebuild the galaxy. We've been given a chance to correct the mistakes of the past, and we can do it together. Sorna, their love strengthened by the trials they had endured, had become a source of hope for both of them. With each passing day, they found that they could face the future with more confidence, knowing that no matter what the galaxy threw at them, they would stand united. And with that unity, Laena and Kai prepared to face the future. Together, they would continue their journey not just for the peace they had fought for, but for the galaxy they had promised to protect. Their love had become the bedrock of their strength, and now as they began this new chapter of their lives, they knew that their greatest challenge lay ahead, creating a future where peace would no longer be fragile, but enduring. As the dust of their hard-won victory settled, Laena and Kai stood side by side, looking out at a galaxy forever changed. The war, the betrayals, the sacrifices, it had all led them to this moment. The peace they had fought so desperately for was fragile, but it was real, and it was theirs to protect. Their journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, nations to rebuild, trust to restore, and alliances to mend. But in each other they had found not just strength, but an unbreakable bond. Together they had defied impossible odds, faced the darkness head-on, and emerged victorious. In the quiet aftermath, Laena turned to Kai, her heart full of gratitude and love. "We've made it," she said softly, her voice full of emotion. "But this is just the beginning." Kai smiled, a rare but genuine warmth spreading across his face. "Together we'll make sure this peace lasts. Together we'll build a future." As they walked forward into the future, hand in hand, the weight of their past victories guided them. The galaxy was theirs to shape, and they were determined to do so with love, compassion, and the wisdom they had earned from their trials. The universe may have been broken, but with their unyielding commitment, Laena and Kai would ensure it was healed, not just for them, but for all the worlds they had sworn to protect. In the end, the greatest victory wasn't the battle won, it was the peace they would build together.